The mountain pass grew narrower with each step, the ancient pines pressing in like silent sentinels bearing witness to Elara's descent into uncertainty. Her boots crunched against frost-hardened earth, each footfall a drumbeat counting down to a fate she had chosen but could not predict. Behind her, the last glimpses of her homeland disappeared into morning mist, the rolling valleys of the Silverpaw territory, where she had run as a wolf beneath full moons, where every stone and stream knew her scent. Gone. Perhaps forever. Elara pulled her cloak tighter against the biting wind that howled through the peaks, like the voices of ancestors warning her back. But there was no turning back now. Her father's face haunted her thoughts. Beta Marcus, strong and proud, reduced to desperation in their final conversation 3 days ago. "The Alpha King has given us 1 week," her father had said, his voice breaking in a way she had never heard before. "Submit to his rule completely, or he will consider our continued independence an act of rebellion. Elara, you know what that means." She knew. Everyone in the wolf realm knew what happened to packs that defied Kael Thornridge, the Alpha King of the Northern Kingdoms. Villages burned, bloodlines ended, stories told in whispers to frighten young wolves into obedience. But the Silverpaw pack had done nothing wrong except exist on land the Alpha King now claimed as part of his expanding territory. They were peaceful, keeping to the old ways, honoring the traditions that bound wolf to earth and moon. They had never sought conflict, never threatened his borders. It didn't matter. Power recognized no such nuances. Elara had volunteered before her father could even suggest it, before the Pack Council could debate sending emissaries or attempting negotiation. She was the Beta's daughter, strong in her wolf form, trained in combat and diplomacy both. If anyone could reach the Alpha King's cold heart, perhaps it would be her. Or perhaps she would simply become another cautionary tale. The checkpoint appeared as the sun reached its zenith, a massive gate of black iron worked into the shape of wolves locked in eternal battle, their fangs bared, their eyes hollow sockets that seemed to track her approach. Guards in dark armor flanked the entrance, their postures rigid with military precision. These were not wolves playing at being soldiers. These were warriors who had seen real blood, real death. "State your business," the taller guard commanded, his hand resting on the sword at his hip. Elara lifted her chin, forcing steel into her voice despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "I am Elara Silverpaw, daughter of Beta Marcus. I seek audience with the Alpha King." The guards exchanged glances. The shorter one, a woman with a scar running from temple to jaw, actually smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Another one come to beg," she said. "They always think they'll be different, that their words will matter." "I'm not here to beg," Elara replied, meeting the woman's gaze steadily. "I'm here to negotiate for my pack's survival." The tall guard snorted. "The Alpha King doesn't negotiate. He commands. You'll learn that soon enough." He gestured toward the gate. "You'll be escorted to the palace. Leave any weapons here." Elara unbuckled the short sword from her belt, then the silver dagger from her boot. The guards searched her thoroughly, professionally, showing neither mercy nor cruelty, just cold efficiency. When they were satisfied, the gate groaned open and 2 new guards appeared to flank her. The path beyond wound through territory that made her wolf stir uneasily within her chest. This was old land, saturated with power that hummed beneath the surface like a living thing. Trees grew larger here, their trunks wide as houses, their branches creating a canopy that turned midday into twilight. Wolves watched from the shadows. She could feel their eyes, sense their presence even when she couldn't see them. This was the heart of the Alpha King's domain, where only the strongest survived, where weakness was culled without hesitation. The palace emerged from the forest like something from a fever dream. Constructed of dark stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, the structure rose in sharp angles and towering spires, more fortress than home. Banners bearing the Alpha King's sigil, a wolf's head crowned with thorns, snapped in the wind above battlements where more guards patrolled. Elara had heard stories of this place, the Thornridge Keep they called it, where the Alpha King had consolidated his power, where he had executed rivals and forged an empire through strength and strategic ruthlessness. No one who entered as a supplicant left unchanged, if they left at all. The massive doors swung open at their approach, revealing an entrance hall that could have swallowed her entire pack house. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness stretched toward a grand staircase, and chandeliers dripping with crystals cast prismatic light across walls hung with tapestries depicting battles and conquests. "This way," one of her escorts said, leading her not up the staircase but down a side corridor. They walked in silence through hallways that seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, cold stone, the occasional wolf-headed statue with ruby eyes that gleamed like fresh blood. Other wolves passed them, nobles in fine clothing who eyed Elara with curiosity or disdain, warriors who looked through her as if she were already gone. Finally, they reached a set of doors so large they must have been made for wolves in their shifted forms. The guards stationed there wore different armor, more ornate, marked with the Alpha King's personal crest. These were his elite, the wolves who had proven themselves worthy of standing in his direct presence. "The supplicant from Silverpaw," her escort announced. One of the elite guards nodded, then pushed open the doors with a boom that echoed through the chamber beyond. The throne room stole Elara's breath. It was vast, with columns of black marble rising like ancient trees to support a vaulted ceiling painted with constellations. Though whether they represented the actual sky or something more symbolic, she couldn't tell. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, their flames casting dancing shadows that made the space feel alive with movement. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of 3 wide steps, sat the throne itself. Carved from a single piece of obsidian, it was a masterwork of intimidation, sharp edges, wolf heads worked into the arms and back, and a sense of weight that seemed to press down on everyone who stood before it. But it was the figure seated upon that throne who truly commanded the space. Alpha King Kael Thornridge. Even sitting, his presence dominated the room. Tall and powerfully built, with shoulders that spoke of both his human strength and the formidable wolf that dwelt within. He wore black clothing that was somehow both simple and unmistakably regal. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, framing a face that could have been carved by the same artist who made his throne. All sharp angles and hard lines, masculine beauty tempered with cruelty, but it was his eyes that held her frozen. Even from this distance, she could see them, gray as winter storm clouds, cold as mountain ice, and utterly unreadable. Those were the eyes of a wolf who had killed without hesitation, who had built his kingdom on the bones of those who opposed him. "Approach!" a voice commanded. Not the Alpha King's, but that of a man standing beside the throne. He was older, silver-haired, wearing robes that marked him as some kind of advisor or council member. Elara forced her feet to move, aware of every eye in the court turning toward her. The throne room wasn't empty. Nobles and officials lined the walls, wolves of rank and power who had come to witness whatever spectacle her arrival would provide. She felt their judgment like physical weight. Her clothes, practical travel wear, marked her as common compared to their finery. Her lack of escort proclaimed her pack's weakness. Her very presence here, alone and undefended, spoke of desperation, but she kept her spine straight, her head high. She was Beta Marcus's daughter. She would not shame her family or her pack by showing fear, even if it threatened to choke her. When she reached the base of the dais, she stopped. Protocol demanded she kneel immediately, but something made her hesitate. Some last vestige of pride that insisted she meet the Alpha King's gaze one final time as an equal before submitting. His eyes locked with hers, and the world seemed to narrow to just that connection. For a heartbeat, for an eternity, they simply stared at each other across the space that separated supplicant from sovereign. What she saw in those gray depths defied her expectations. Not the sadistic pleasure she had imagined, not the cold dismissal of a tyrant already bored with her petition. Instead, something flickered there. Surprise? Recognition? Gone before she could name it, replaced by the same implacable coldness. "Kneel," the silver-haired advisor commanded. This time, Elara obeyed. She dropped to her knees on the cold marble, the sound echoing through the sudden silence that had fallen over the court. Then she bent forward, pressing her forehead to the floor in the ultimate gesture of submission, baring the back of her neck as a wolf would to acknowledge a superior's dominance. "Alpha King Kael Thornridge," she began, her voice steady despite her position. I am Elara Silverpaw, daughter of Beta Marcus, representative of the Silverpaw Pack. I come before you to plea for mercy on behalf of my people. Silence greeted her words. She could hear her own heartbeat, feel her wolf pacing anxiously within her chest. Your pack sits on land I have claimed. The Alpha King's voice came at last, deep and resonant, carrying effortlessly through the vast space. Your Alpha refused my directive to submit and join the Northern Kingdoms under my rule. This is not a matter requiring mercy. This is a matter of dealing with rebellion. We are not rebels, Your Majesty, Elara said, still pressed against the floor. We are a peaceful pack. We have taken no action against you or your territories. We simply wish to maintain our independence, as we have for generations. Independence? The word carried mocking weight. There is no such thing in the wolf realm, girl. There is only strength and submission. Your pack chose neither strength nor submission, which means you chose destruction. Murmurs rippled through the court. Agreement, anticipation, perhaps even dark amusement at her doomed attempt. Elara's fingers curled against the marble, nails scraping stone. This was the moment. Everything depended on what she said next. Then I offer submission now, she said clearly. Not of my pack, but of myself. Take me as your prisoner, your servant, your hostage, whatever you require. But spare the Silverpaw Pack. They are innocent. Punish me for our collective pride. But let them live in peace under your rule. The murmurs grew louder, surprised now. Apparently, offering oneself as sacrifice was not common, or perhaps it was simply futile. You would trade your freedom for theirs? The Alpha King asked, and something in his tone had changed, sharpened with interest or anger, she couldn't tell which. Without hesitation, Elara replied, My life, my service, my complete submission to whatever fate you decree. Only spare my pack. Look at me, he commanded. Elara raised her head slowly, still on her knees, but no longer pressed to the floor. The Alpha King had leaned forward slightly on his throne, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see through flesh and bone to the very core of her being. You understand what you're offering? He said. Complete submission means I own you. Your life becomes mine to direct as I see fit. You would have no rights, no freedom, no voice in your own fate. You would exist solely at my pleasure. I understand, Elara said, meeting his gaze despite the fear clawing at her throat. I offer it freely, for my pack's sake. Something shifted in the throne room's atmosphere. A tension, a held breath, as if the very stones waited for what would come next. The Alpha King rose from his throne with fluid grace, descending the 3 steps of the dais with measured strides. He was taller than she had estimated, his presence seeming to fill the space as he approached. Elara forced herself not to shrink back, not to show weakness even as every instinct screamed at her to flee from the apex predator moving toward her. He stopped directly before her, close enough that she could smell the scent of him, pine and winter air, underlaid with something uniquely his own, the scent of an alpha whose power was absolute. You show courage, he said, his voice lower now, meant for her ears primarily, though the quiet court could surely hear. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. Your pack has done nothing to earn such loyalty from their beta's daughter. They are my family, Elara said simply. All of them. I would do anything to protect my family. The Alpha King circled her slowly, studying her from every angle like a wolf examining prey. Elara remained kneeling, her heart hammering but her posture straight. Tell me, Elara Silverpaw, he said from behind her. What makes you think your life is worth an entire pack's survival? What value do you bring that would satisfy this bargain? The question was a trap. She could feel it. Claim too much worth, and she would seem arrogant. Claim too little, and he would dismiss her offer entirely. I bring whatever value you assign me, Your Majesty, she answered carefully. I am trained in combat, diplomacy, strategy, and pack management. I am strong in my wolf form, educated in law and history, capable of serving in whatever capacity you require. But more than that, I bring absolute loyalty, not to you, but to my word. If I pledge service, I will serve faithfully until death. That oath will not break. He completed his circle. coming to stand before her again. For a long moment, he simply stared down at her with those storm-gray eyes. Then he did something that shocked the entire court into absolute silence. He extended his hand. "Rise," he commanded. Elara stared at the offered hand, confusion flooding through her. In wolf hierarchy, you didn't help a supplicant up. You kept them kneeling until you accepted or rejected their petition. You maintained the power dynamic. "I said rise," the Alpha King repeated, a hint of command sharpening his tone. Slowly, uncertain, Elara placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. Large, calloused, radiating warmth despite the coldness of his demeanor. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, then didn't release her hand immediately. "You misunderstand your situation," he said, his voice carrying through the throne room with absolute authority. "You came here prepared to sacrifice yourself as a servant, a prisoner, perhaps a slave. You knelt before me expecting punishment and submission." Elara's confusion deepened. "Yes, Your Majesty. But I am not accepting your offer as stated," he interrupted, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "You will not serve me as a servant. You will not be my prisoner. You will not be treated as a slave or hostage." Hope and fear warred in her chest. Was he refusing entirely? Condemning her pack after all? The Alpha King raised their joined hands, displaying them to the entire court. When he spoke next, his words shattered every expectation, every assumption, every story she had ever heard about the ruthless tyrant who ruled the northern kingdoms. "Elara Silverpaw," he declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "I do not command you to kneel. I command you to rise as my Luna, as the queen who will rule at my side, as my fated mate and the true power beside the throne." The throne room erupted in chaos. Gasps, shouts, protests from the nobles lining the walls. The silver-haired advisor actually stumbled backward, his face draining of color. Elara herself froze, unable to process what she had just heard, certain she had misunderstood. "Your Majesty," the advisor stammered. You cannot." "I can and I will," the Alpha King cut him off, his eyes never leaving Elara's face. "Silence, all of you." The command cracked through the throne room like a whip, and the noise died instantly. The power in his voice, in his very presence, was undeniable. This was an alpha whose word was absolute law. He turned his full attention back to Elara, who stood trembling with shock and confusion, her hand still clasped in his. "You came here expecting to trade your freedom for your pack's survival," he said quietly. Meant for her ears alone, though the room was silent enough that others might catch the words. "You came prepared to sacrifice everything for those you love. That courage, that loyalty, that strength of character, those are the qualities of a true Luna." "I don't understand," Elara whispered. "You don't even know me. This makes no sense. Why would you—" "Because the moment you walked into this throne room, I knew," he said, and for the first time, something other than coldness entered his voice. Certainty, inevitability, perhaps even a hint of wonder. The bond between us, faint but unmistakable. You felt it too, when our eyes first met. Don't deny it. Elara's breath caught. She had felt something, that strange pull, that moment of recognition when their gazes locked. She had dismissed it as fear, as the natural response to standing before a dangerous predator. But now, with his hand in hers, she could feel it more clearly. A thread of connection, gossamer thin but definitely present, linking her to this stranger, this feared king, the mate bond, the rarest, most sacred connection between wolves. "No," she breathed. "That's not possible. Fated mates are rare and they're supposed to— They should be what? Perfect for each other? Perhaps we are, in ways neither of us can yet understand." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a surprisingly gentle gesture. Or perhaps fate has a sense of irony, binding together a king feared for ruthlessness and a woman who would kneel before him to save others. "Your Majesty," a woman's voice cut through, sharp, aristocratic, filled with barely contained fury. Elara tore her gaze from the Alpha King to see a stunning female wolf step forward from the crowd, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, Her dress worth more than everything Elara's pack owned combined. Surely you're not serious. This girl is nobody, from a pack that has defied you. Making her your Luna would be an insult to every noble family in the kingdom, especially those who have offered their daughters for consideration. Other voices joined in agreement, a rising tide of protest from those who clearly saw Elara as a threat to their own ambitions and positions. The Alpha King's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Lady Ravenna," he said, his tone pleasant but edged with danger, "are you questioning my judgment?" The blonde woman, Lady Ravenna, paled slightly but held her ground. "I'm merely pointing out the political implications, Your Majesty. The court will never accept her. The noble families will be outraged. And the girl herself looks as confused as the rest of us. Has she even agreed to this arrangement?" All eyes turned to Elara, who stood frozen in a nightmare that had somehow become even more surreal than she had anticipated. Become his Luna? Rule beside him? It was absurd. It was impossible. It was her pack. The thought cut through the chaos in her mind. Her pack would be spared. If she became his Luna, he couldn't destroy the Silverpaw pack without bringing shame on himself. They would be protected, safe, allowed to live. Isn't that why she had come? To save them? No matter the cost? "I agree," Elara heard herself say, the words emerging steady despite the storm inside her. "I accept the position of Luna, if that is your command, Your Majesty." The Alpha King's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a less imposing face. "Not a command, Elara. A choice. You can refuse. You can walk away from this throne room and return to your pack, and I will leave them in peace regardless. But if you accept knowing that you will be Luna in truth, not a figurehead, not a political pawn, but my equal in ruling this kingdom." "How can I be your equal?" Elara asked, finding her voice even as her mind reeled. "I know nothing of court politics, of ruling, of being a queen. I came here to kneel, not to wear a crown." "Then you will learn," he said simply. "And in exchange, your pack will be protected, integrated into my kingdom with full rights and privileges. More than safety, prosperity, opportunity, a future." It was everything she had hoped for and nothing she had expected. The price was different, the path unimaginable, but the outcome, her pack's survival, remained the same. Elara looked into those storm-gray eyes, searching for deception, for cruelty, for the ruthless tyrant she had been taught to fear. What she found instead was complexity, layers of intention she couldn't yet read, and beneath it all, that undeniable pull of the mate bond calling to something deep within her. "I accept," she said again, louder this time, letting her voice carry through the throne room. "I will be your Luna." The Alpha King raised their joined hands higher, displaying them to the entire court. "Hear me, all assembled," he declared with absolute authority. "I present to you Elara Silverpaw, who will be recognized as Luna of the Northern Kingdoms. Any who question her right to stand beside me will answer to me personally." The threat in those final words was unmistakable. The court fell silent, though Elara could see fury and calculation on many faces. She had just become the target of every ambitious noble in the kingdom, every wolf who had hoped to gain power through a political marriage to the Alpha King. "Come," the Alpha King said to her directly, releasing her hand only to place his palm against the small of her back, guiding her toward the throne. "Stand beside me while I finish today's court business. You might as well begin your education immediately." Elara let herself be guided up the 3 steps of the dais, hyper-aware of every eye following her movement. When they reached the throne, the Alpha King gestured to a smaller chair that stood slightly behind and to the right of his seat. The Luna's throne, she realized, positioned to show both partnership and hierarchy. She sat carefully, feeling the ancient wood beneath her, still warm from whoever had occupied it last. Or perhaps it had stood empty for years, waiting for whoever would finally claim it. The Alpha King returned to his throne, settling back into it with the ease of long practice. When he spoke next, his voice had returned to that cold, commanding tone he had used when she first entered. "Lord Greaves, you may now present your petition regarding the timber rights." Court business resumed as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. But Elara barely heard the words being exchanged. She sat in the Luna's throne, her hands gripping the armrests to keep from shaking, her mind trying to process what had just happened. She had come to sacrifice herself as a servant. Instead, she had been elevated to queen. She had expected punishment and chains. Instead, she wore an invisible crown and sat beside the most powerful wolf in the realm, and none of it made sense. None of it felt real, except for that persistent tug in her chest, that whisper of connection to the man seated beside her, the mate bond she couldn't deny, couldn't ignore, couldn't yet understand. As nobles presented their various complaints and requests, the Alpha King handled each with efficiency and decisiveness. Elara watched, observed, began to notice patterns. He wasn't cruel without cause, but he was utterly unmoved by emotional appeals or attempts at manipulation. He valued logic, strength, and loyalty above all else. And occasionally, so briefly she might have imagined it, his gaze would flicker to her, checking, assessing, perhaps wondering about his own impulsive decision. Finally, the silver-haired advisor stepped forward. "Your Majesty, that completes today's scheduled audiences. Shall I prepare the Luna's quarters?" "Yes, Counselor Varden. The east wing overlooking the gardens. See that she has everything she requires." The Alpha King stood, and Elara quickly followed suit. Uncertain of protocol, he turned to face her fully. "You must be exhausted from your journey. Rest tonight. Tomorrow your real education begins." "Your Majesty," Elara said, the formal title still strange on her tongue. "May I send word to my pack? They'll be worried. They need to know." "Already done," he interrupted. "A messenger left the moment you accepted my offer. Your father will receive word that you are safe and that the Silverpaw pack is under my protection." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You have my word, Elara. No harm will come to them." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. This was the ruthless king who had built an empire on conquest, yet he spoke to her with something approaching gentleness. "Thank you," she managed, uncertain what else to say. He nodded once, then addressed the court. "The audience is concluded. Dismissed." The throne room emptied rapidly, nobles departing in clusters, their conversations undoubtedly full of speculation about the day's dramatic turn. Lady Ravenna cast one last poisonous look at Elara before sweeping out with her entourage. Soon only Elara, the Alpha King, and Counselor Varden remained. "I'll have servants show you to your quarters," Varden said to Elara, his tone carefully neutral despite the clear disapproval in his eyes. "If you'll follow me." "A moment," the Alpha King said, stopping them. He approached Elara again, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I know this isn't what you expected. I know you're confused and probably frightened. But understand this. I didn't make you my Luna on a whim. The mate bond is real, even if we barely know each other. We'll navigate this together." "Why didn't you just tell me to kneel and serve?" Elara asked quietly. "It would have been easier for everyone. The court would accept it. I would have accepted it. Because you deserve better than kneeling," he said simply. "And because I need a Luna who possesses the courage to stand." Before she could respond, he turned and strode away, his footsteps echoing through the vast throne room until he disappeared through a side door. Elara stood alone in the massive space, staring at the empty throne, trying to comprehend how her desperate mission to save her pack had transformed into something far more complex and dangerous. She had bowed before the Alpha King prepared to lose everything. Instead, she had been commanded to rise as his queen, and somehow, that terrified her even more than surrender ever could. The morning sun filtered through silk curtains, painting Elara's new quarters in shades of gold and amber. She had barely slept, her mind replaying yesterday's events in an endless loop. The throne room, the Alpha King's shocking declaration, the fury in the noble's eyes. Now, sitting at the edge of an ornate bed that could have fit her entire family, she felt more like an imposter than a queen. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," Elara called, straightening her posture. A woman swept into the room, middle-aged, impeccably dressed, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her expression suggested she had just tasted something unpleasant. "I am Madame Corvina, the palace's protocol mistress," she announced without preamble. "His Majesty has assigned me to prepare you for your duties as Luna. We have much work to do and very little time. Elara stood, meeting the woman's critical gaze. I appreciate your help, Madame Corvina. Help? The woman's eyebrow arched. Child, I am here because the Alpha King commands it, not because I approve of this situation. A girl from an insignificant pack, elevated to Luna without proper courtship or political alliance. It's unprecedented, scandalous. The word stung, but Elara kept her expression neutral. Nevertheless, I am Luna now. I intend to fulfill that role to the best of my ability. Madame Corvina studied her for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. Not approval, but perhaps acknowledgement of spirit. Then we begin immediately. Your wardrobe is entirely unsuitable. The seamstresses are waiting in the next room. After that, etiquette lessons, followed by a tour of the palace, then dinner protocol, and— Wait, Elara interrupted. When do I see the Alpha King? His Majesty has duties that occupy his days. You will see him at tonight's formal dinner, where you will be officially presented to the inner court. Madame Corvina's tone suggested this would be an ordeal. Now come, we're wasting time. The hours that followed tested Elara's patience more than any physical trial could have. She stood for measurements while seamstresses circled like predatory birds, pinning and tucking fabric into gowns that felt like beautiful cages. She memorized seemingly endless rules about which fork to use, how deeply to nod to various ranks of nobility, the proper way to enter a room, to sit, to speak. A Luna does not slouch, Madame Corvina corrected for the 10th time. Your posture represents the kingdom itself. A Luna does not raise her voice, regardless of provocation. A Luna must always appear serene, even when facing enemies. By afternoon, Elara's head throbbed with information, her back ached from maintaining perfect posture, and her patience wore dangerously thin. When Madame Corvina finally dismissed her for a brief rest before dinner preparations, Elara escaped to the balcony of her quarters, desperate for fresh air and a moment alone. The view stole her breath. The palace gardens stretched below in geometric perfection, hedges trimmed into intricate patterns, fountains sparkling in the sunlight, pathways winding between flower beds that would bloom in spring. Beyond the gardens, she could see the forest extending toward distant mountains, and somewhere in that direction lay her homeland. Impressive, isn't it? Elara spun to find a young woman leaning against the balcony doorframe, perhaps a few years older than Elara's 22 years, with warm brown skin and knowing eyes. She wore servant's clothing, but carried herself with unusual confidence. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you enter, Elara said. That's because I'm very good at not being heard. The woman smiled, stepping onto the balcony. I'm Mira, assigned as your personal attendant. Though honestly, I'm more like a spy, making sure you don't do anything to embarrass His Majesty. The frank admission surprised a laugh from Elara. At least you're honest about it. Always am. Drives Madame Corvina crazy. Mira moved to stand beside her at the railing. So, how are you surviving your first day as Luna-to-be? I'm drowning in rules and expectations, but I'll manage. Elara glanced at her new attendant. Can I ask you something? What do people really think about the Alpha King's decision? Mira's expression grew serious. You want the polite version or the truth? Truth, always. Most of the court thinks you're either incredibly clever or incredibly doomed. The noble families are furious. They've been positioning their daughters for years, trying to catch His Majesty's attention. You appeared out of nowhere and claimed the prize they all wanted. I didn't claim anything, Elara protested. I came here to save my pack, not to become queen. I know. Everyone knows. That's part of what makes them so angry. Mira lowered her voice. Some think the Alpha King has lost his mind, making a political decision based on something as unpredictable as the mate bond. Others think he's using you for some scheme they haven't figured out yet. And a few— She paused. A few think maybe, just maybe, the ruthless Alpha King might actually have a heart after all. Before Elara could respond, a commotion erupted from inside her quarters. Raised voices, something crashing. Both women rushed back inside to find Madame Corvina facing off against 3 elegantly dressed women who had apparently forced their way past the guards. The leader, blonde, beautiful, radiating hostility, was Lady Ravenna, whom Elara remembered from yesterday's throne room. This is highly irregular, Madame Corvina was saying, her face flushed with anger. You cannot simply barge into the Luna's private quarters. Luna? Lady Ravenna's laugh was sharp as broken glass. This girl is no Luna. She's a temporary amusement, a novelty that will fade once His Majesty comes to his senses. Elara stepped forward, her wolf stirring with defensive anger. Lady Ravenna, to what do I owe this unexpected visit? Ravenna's cold blue eyes swept over Elara with undisguised contempt. I came to see for myself what could possibly have caught the Alpha King's attention. How disappointing to find you're exactly as unremarkable as rumored. The two women flanking Ravenna tittered, emboldened by their leader's boldness. Remarkable enough that the Alpha King chose me as his Luna, Elara replied evenly, though her hands clenched at her sides. Was there something specific you needed, or did you come merely to insult me? I came to give you advice, country wolf. Ravenna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You are out of your depth here. Court politics will eat you alive. The nobles will never accept you. And when the Alpha King's infatuation fades, and it will, you'll find yourself with no allies, no protection, and nowhere to run. Is that a threat? Elara asked quietly. It's a promise. Ravenna smiled, showing too many teeth. Enjoy your moment in the sun, little Luna. Winter is coming, and you have no idea how cold this court can be. Lady Ravenna, Mira interrupted, her tone respectful but firm. Unless you have official business approved by His Majesty, I must ask you to leave, immediately. For a moment, Ravenna looked ready to argue. Then her gaze flickered to something behind Elara, and her expression shifted to barely concealed fear. Elara turned to find the Alpha King standing in the doorway, connecting her quarters to an adjoining room. His room, she realized. He must have heard everything. Your Majesty, Ravenna said quickly, executing a perfect curtsy. I was simply welcoming the new Luna to court. By forcing your way into her private quarters and threatening her? Kael's voice was dangerously soft. That's an interesting definition of welcome. I meant no disrespect. Leave, now. And Lady Ravenna? He waited until she met his eyes. If I hear of you harassing my Luna again, your family's land grants will be reviewed, thoroughly. Do I make myself clear? Ravenna's face paled. Crystal clear, Your Majesty. She fled, her companions scrambling after her. The door closed behind them with a decisive click. Silence filled the room. Madame Corvina looked torn between relief and concern. Mira suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Elara stood frozen, unsure what to say. The Alpha King crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping directly before her. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the barely leashed anger in his eyes. Are you all right? He asked, and the genuine concern in his voice surprised her. I'm fine. I can handle insults from jealous nobles. You shouldn't have to handle them at all. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. I knew there would be resistance to my choice, but I underestimated how quickly the vultures would circle. Why did you really choose me? Elara asked suddenly, the question bursting out before she could stop it. The mate bond is rare, yes, but you're the Alpha King. You could have ignored it, married politically, kept your power secure. Instead, you've created chaos by elevating someone with no standing, no connections, no experience. Why? Kael studied her for a long moment, then gestured to Madame Corvina and Mira. Leave us. Close the door. Both women departed quickly, though Elara caught Mira's worried glance before the door shut. Alone with the Alpha King in her quarters, Elara suddenly became aware of how informal this was, how inappropriate by the very rules she'd been learning all day. The mate bond isn't just rare, Kael began, moving to the balcony. It's sacred. My parents were fated mates. I watched them rule together with a unity that made them unstoppable. When my mother died, my father followed within a year. Not from injury or illness, but from a broken bond. The mate connection isn't something to ignore or dismiss for political convenience. He turned to face her, leaning against the balcony railing. But you're right that I'm creating chaos. I've built my rule on strength and strategic marriages throughout my territory. By choosing you based on the mate bond, I'm showing what some will see as weakness, emotion over logic. Then why risk it? Elara pressed, joining him at the railing but maintaining careful distance. Because I'm tired of being alone at the top, he said quietly. Because I've spent 10 years building this kingdom through conquest and fear, and I look around at my court and see sycophants and schemers but no one I can trust. No one who would challenge me, stand beside me as an equal rather than a subordinate. His gray eyes met hers. Then you walked into my throne room, ready to sacrifice everything for your pack, and I felt the bond snap into place. I saw someone with the strength I need, the loyalty I value, the courage that matches my own. Elara's breath caught. This wasn't the ruthless tyrant of legend. This was a man. Powerful, yes, but also isolated and searching for something real in a world of political games. I'm still not qualified to be Luna, she said. I spent today learning which fork to use and how to curtsy properly. That doesn't make me ready to rule a kingdom. No, Kael agreed. But your instincts do. Your willingness to face Ravenna just now, to hold your ground despite being terrified, that's what makes a Luna. The rest is just theater. He pushed off from the railing. Tonight's dinner will be your first real test. The inner court, my most powerful nobles and advisors, will be watching for any sign of weakness. They'll test you with words, implications, political traps. How do I pass a test when I don't even know the rules? Elara asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. By being yourself, by showing them the same strength that brought you here. He moved closer, and she caught his scent. Pine and winter air, familiar now but still intoxicating. And by remembering you're not alone. I'll be beside you. The bond between us may be new, but it's real. Trust it. Trust me. I don't know you well enough to trust you, Elara admitted, but I trust that you believe what you're saying. Something that might have been respect flickered in his expression. That's honest. I appreciate honesty. He glanced at the angle of the sun. You have 2 hours before dinner. Mira will help you dress appropriately. Remember? You're not performing for them. You're showing them who their Luna is. He moved toward the connecting door to his chambers, then paused. Elara, what Ravenna said about having no allies? She's wrong. You have me, and anyone who threatens you threatens the throne itself. Then he was gone, leaving Elara alone with racing thoughts and a chest full of conflicting emotions. The mate bond hummed quietly beneath everything, growing stronger each moment she spent near him. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? Could she trust herself in this impossible situation? Only time would tell. 2 hours later, Elara stood before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The gown Mira had selected was a deep forest green that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. Sophisticated without being ostentatious, elegant without appearing to try too hard. Her dark hair had been arranged in an intricate style that looked effortless, but had taken 45 minutes to create. Subtle cosmetics enhanced her features without masking them. You look like a Luna, Mira said softly, stepping back to admire her work. I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life, Elara corrected, but she had to admit the transformation was impressive. A knock announced the arrival of the guard escort. Time to face the inner court. The walk to the formal dining hall felt like a march to execution. Every servant they passed stopped to stare. Every noble they encountered whispered behind hands. Elara kept her spine straight, her expression calm, channeling every lesson from Madame Corvina's brutal training session. The dining hall doors opened to reveal a space designed for intimidation. A massive table dominated the center, already surrounded by 20 of the kingdom's most powerful wolves. Chandeliers dripped crystal light, tapestries depicted historical victories, and at the head of the table, the Alpha King sat in a chair that managed to be both seat and throne. Every eye turned to Elara as she entered. She paused at the threshold, taking in the assembled court. These were the inner circle: advisors, military commanders, heads of the most influential families, each one a potential ally or enemy. The Alpha King rose, and custom demanded everyone else follow suit. Lords and ladies of the inner court, he announced, his voice carrying perfect authority. I present Luna Elara Silverpaw, who will rule beside me as my fated mate and equal partner in governance. He extended his hand toward her, a gesture of invitation and partnership. Every person in the room watched to see what she would do. Elara walked forward with measured steps, her heart pounding, but her expression serene. When she reached Kael, she placed her hand in his, feeling that now familiar spark of connection. He guided her to the seat on his right, the Luna's place of honor, and remained standing until she was settled. Only then did he sit, allowing the rest of the court to follow. "Let the meal begin," he commanded. Servants appeared with the first course as conversation resumed around the table, careful, measured, everyone aware they were being observed. Counselor Varden, the silver-haired advisor from yesterday, sat across from Elara. He regarded her with poorly concealed skepticism. "Luna Elara," he began, his tone polite but probing. "I understand you come from the Silverpaw Pack. A small territory, is it not? Primarily agricultural?" The question seemed innocent, but carried implications. Backward, unsophisticated, unprepared for power. "Small but proud," Elara replied evenly. "We've maintained our independence for 5 generations through careful resource management and strong community bonds. Sometimes the smallest packs survive precisely because they understand cooperation over conquest." The slight emphasis on that last word wasn't lost on anyone. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. The Alpha King's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "An interesting perspective," Varden continued, "though I wonder how such pastoral experience translates to ruling a warrior kingdom. The same way any skill translates," Elara said, "through learning, adaptation, and willingness to seek wisdom from those with more experience. I don't claim to know everything about ruling, but I know about loyalty, about protecting those who depend on you, about making hard decisions for the greater good. Those principles seem universal, whether managing a pack of 200 or a kingdom of thousands." A woman in military dress, Commander Thorn, if Elara remembered correctly, leaned forward with interest. "Well said. Tell me, Luna, do you have combat training?" "Basic training, yes. My father insisted all pack members learn self-defense. I'm proficient with blade and bow and competent in my wolf form." "Competent?" Commander Thorn's eyebrow rose. "That's modest language." "Honest language," Elara corrected. "I'm good enough to hold my own against most opponents, but I've never faced true battle. I won't claim skills I haven't tested." The commander nodded approvingly. "Honesty is rarer than skill. I respect that." One small victory. But the dinner was far from over. As courses came and went, nobles posed questions designed to trap or expose her inexperience. Elara answered as truthfully as possible, admitting ignorance when appropriate but never appearing weak. She watched the Alpha King handle diplomatic inquiries with careful attention, learning his style. Then Lady Ravenna's uncle, Lord Ashford, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, if I may raise a delicate subject?" Kael's expression remained neutral. "Proceed. The question of the Luna's lineage is concerning to some families. No offense to Luna Elara, but the precedent of elevating someone from an insignificant pack disrupts centuries of careful alliance building. How do we assure the noble houses that their loyalty and lineage still matter when someone with no political connections can simply appear and claim the highest position?" The table fell silent. This was the real challenge. Not Elara's inexperience, but the political chaos her elevation created. Before Kael could respond, Elara spoke. "Lord Ashford raises a valid concern, so let me address it directly." She set down her fork, meeting his eyes steadily. "I didn't seek this position. I didn't scheme or manipulate or position myself for power. I came to this palace prepared to kneel and serve, to sacrifice my freedom for my pack's survival. The Alpha King chose differently, not because of my lineage or political value, but because of the mate bond that neither of us controls." She let her gaze sweep the table. "I understand that's disruptive. I understand it threatens carefully laid plans. But the mate bond is sacred in our culture. Would any of you truly argue the Alpha King should ignore it for political convenience? And if he did, what would that say about his character, his respect for our traditions?" "Of course the mate bond is sacred," Lord Ashford replied smoothly. "But perhaps—" "There is no but," Elara interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Either our traditions matter or they don't. Either the mate bond is sacred or it's negotiable. You can't have it both ways simply because the bond didn't connect your daughters to the throne. Gasps rippled around the table. Even Kael looked momentarily surprised by her directness. Lord Ashford's face reddened. I dare speak truth, Elara said, keeping her voice level despite her racing heart. I didn't choose this situation, but I won't apologize for it either. Yes, I'm inexperienced. Yes, I'm from a small pack. Yes, I disrupted your plans. But I'm here now, trying to learn, trying to serve this kingdom alongside the Alpha King. You can work with me or against me, but either way, I'm not going anywhere. Silence. Thick, heavy, dangerous silence. Then the Alpha King began to laugh. Genuine amusement that transformed his severe features. Well said, my Luna. Well said indeed. He raised his glass. A toast. To Luna Elara, who possesses the courage to speak truth even when surrounded by wolves who would prefer comfortable lies. May she bring that same honesty to our court and challenge us to be better than we are. Slowly, reluctantly, the nobles raised their glasses. To Luna Elara, they echoed, though not all voices carried conviction. As glasses clinked and conversation resumed, Kael leaned closer to Elara. You just made enemies and allies in equal measure, he murmured. Commander Thorn respects you now. Lord Ashford will work against you. The others are deciding. Did I go too far? Elara whispered back. No. You showed strength without cruelty, honesty without naivety. That's exactly what a Luna should do. His hand found hers beneath the table, fingers intertwining briefly. You're doing better than you know. The warmth of his touch, the approval in his voice, sent unexpected comfort through her. The mate bond pulsed stronger, and for the first time since entering this palace, Elara felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually survive this trial. The dinner continued with safer conversation, but Elara remained vigilant, aware she had passed one test, but many more awaited. She had risen as commanded. Now she had to prove she could stand. 3 weeks had passed since that first dinner, and Elara had learned that surviving court politics was far more exhausting than any physical battle. Every conversation held hidden meanings. Every gesture carried political weight, and every smile might conceal a knife. She sat in what had become her private study, a smaller room adjacent to her quarters where she could review documents and meet with advisors away from the main court scrutiny. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows as she studied reports from various territories, trying to understand the complex web of alliances and tensions that held the kingdom together. A knock interrupted her concentration. Enter. Mira stepped inside, her usual cheerful expression replaced by concern. Luna, you have a visitor. She's insistent. Before Elara could respond, a woman pushed past Mira into the study. She was older, perhaps 50, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that assessed everything instantly. Her clothing marked her as a scholar or advisor, rather than nobility. Luna Elara, the woman said, executing a brief, perfunctory bow. I am Magistrate Elise Blackwood. We need to talk, privately. Elara gestured for Mira to close the door, though her attendant looked reluctant to leave. Once they were alone, Elara studied her unexpected visitor. Magistrate Blackwood, I've seen your name on several legal documents. You oversee judicial matters for the Eastern Territories, among other responsibilities. Elise moved to the window, checking the gardens below before continuing. I'm taking a significant risk coming here, but someone needs to tell you the truth about this kingdom before you stumble into something that gets you killed. Alara's stomach tightened. What truth? The Alpha King's reputation for ruthlessness isn't exaggerated. It's understated. Elise turned from the window, her expression grave. In the 10 years since he took power, Kael Thornridge has crushed 17 rebellions, absorbed 23 smaller packs through force or coercion, and executed or exiled anyone who posed a genuine threat to his authority. He's brilliant, strategic, and absolutely merciless when his power is challenged. I know his history, Elara said carefully. Everyone does. Do you know why? Elise pressed. Do you understand what drives him to consolidate power so aggressively? Elara hesitated. In their limited private conversations, Kael had revealed little about his motivations beyond wanting unity and strength. He believes a divided wolf realm is vulnerable, that only through unified rule can we survive external threats. That's the public reasoning, yes. Elise moved closer, lowering her voice. The truth is more complex. 15 years ago, before Kael became Alpha King, the wolf territories were fragmented into dozens of small packs, constantly warring with each other. His father, the previous Alpha King, tried to unite them through diplomacy and alliance. Do you know what happened? He was assassinated, Elara said quietly, along with the queen. I learned that much from the histories. Assassinated by a coalition of smaller packs who feared losing their independence, Elise confirmed. Kael was 22 years old when he watched his parents die. He inherited a fractured kingdom, enemies on all sides, and a burning need to ensure such vulnerability never existed again. So he spent the next decade conquering, intimidating, and ruthlessly eliminating anyone who might threaten stability. Elara absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. He's building the empire his father died trying to create, through very different methods, Elise agreed. And here's what you need to understand. Many of those methods were necessary. The wolf realm was tearing itself apart. Kael brought order through strength when nothing else worked. But, she paused, choosing words carefully. There are factions within this kingdom who believe he's gone too far, who think his consolidation of power has created a different kind of tyranny. And those factions are watching you very closely. Why? Elara asked, though she suspected the answer. Because you're the first person in 10 years who might actually influence him. The first potential weakness in his armor. Elise's gaze was penetrating. Some hope you'll soften his approach, make him more merciful. Others fear you'll manipulate him for your own pack's benefit. And a few, her voice dropped further, a few see you as an opportunity to destabilize his rule entirely. A chill ran through Elara. You're saying people might use me against him? I'm saying they're already trying. Elise pulled a folded paper from her cloak. This was intercepted yesterday by someone loyal to the throne. It's a coded message between two noble houses discussing the Silverpaw situation and how it might be leveraged for regime change. Elara took the paper with trembling fingers, scanning the cryptic phrases. Even without understanding all the code, the intent was clear. Conspiracy. Why bring this to me instead of the Alpha King? She asked. Because if Kael discovers this conspiracy, his response will be swift and brutal. Entire families might be executed or banished. More instability, more fear, more consolidation of power. Elise met her eyes. But if you discover it and handle it more carefully, perhaps there's another way. A chance to show that Luna Elara values justice over vengeance, that the throne can be strong without being cruel. You're asking me to investigate treason without telling the Alpha King? Elara said incredulously. That's incredibly dangerous for both of us. Yes, but it's also an opportunity. Elise moved toward the door. You wanted to know what being Luna truly means? It means navigating impossible situations where every choice has consequences. It means finding ways to protect the kingdom that don't always align with the king's methods. Think about it, Luna. But don't think too long. Conspiracies don't wait. She slipped out before Elara could respond, leaving behind the damning document and 100 new questions. Elara stared at the coded message, her mind racing. Should she tell Kael immediately? Keep investigating on her own? Trust a magistrate she barely knew? The mate bond tugged at her conscience. Kael deserved honesty from his Luna, but Elise's words echoed. His response would be brutal. More death, more fear, more enemies. Before she could decide, another knock sounded. Luna, Mira's voice. The Alpha King requests your presence in his private war room. Immediately. Elara quickly hid the coded message in her desk drawer and composed herself. Tell him I'll be there momentarily. The war room occupied the highest tower of the palace. A circular chamber with maps covering every wall and a massive table displaying a three-dimensional representation of the entire kingdom. Kael stood studying the eastern territories when Elara entered, his posture tense. You sent for me? She said. He turned, and she saw the storm in his gray eyes. We have a problem. Reports from the border indicate unusual movement. Warriors gathering in the southern territories without explanation. It could be nothing, or it could be the beginning of another rebellion. Elara moved to the table, studying the map. Which territories specifically? House Ravenna's lands, primarily, along with 2 smaller houses allied with them. His jaw tightened. I should have anticipated this. Lady Ravenna's hostility toward you wasn't just personal jealousy. Her family has been pushing for greater autonomy for years. Your elevation to Luna apparently pushed them toward more drastic action. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Elise's warning, and now this. Were they connected? What are you planning to do? Elara asked carefully. What I always do. Demonstrate that challenging my authority has consequences. He traced the southern border on the map. I'll take a military force south, confront House Ravenna directly, and make it clear that gathering unauthorized forces is an act of rebellion. If they submit, I'll be merciful. If they don't, he didn't need to finish that sentence. And if it's a trap? Elara said quietly. If they're trying to draw you away from the palace for some reason? Kael looked at her sharply. You think there's a larger conspiracy? This was the moment. Tell him about Elise's visit and the coded message, or investigate further before potentially triggering the brutal response Elise predicted. I think House Ravenna isn't subtle enough to orchestrate something this complex alone, Elara said carefully, truthful without revealing everything. Before you march south with military force, perhaps we should gather more information. Understand what we're really facing. Information gathering takes time. Time for enemies to strengthen their position. But Kael's expression had shifted from immediate anger to tactical consideration. What do you suggest? Let me go to House Ravenna, Elara said, the idea forming as she spoke. Not with an army, but as Luna conducting diplomatic visits to outlying territories. If there's a genuine threat, I might be able to identify it without triggering open conflict. If it's nothing, we avoid creating enemies unnecessarily. Absolutely not, Kael said flatly. You're suggesting walking into potential danger without protection, without the intimidation of the Alpha King's presence, Elara interrupted. People say things to a diplomatic Luna they'd never say to a conquering king, and I wouldn't go unprotected. I'd take guards, advisors, all appropriate security, but I'd go as an emissary seeking understanding, not an executioner seeking blood. Kael studied her for a long moment, conflict clear in his expression. You've been Luna for 3 weeks. You're not ready for this kind of mission. When will I be ready? After 6 months? A year? Elara moved closer to him. You chose me as your Luna because you saw strength in me. Let me use it. Let me prove I can be more than a decorative queen who smiles at court functions. This isn't about proving anything. Yes, it is. She held his gaze. To the court, to the nobles, to myself. Everyone is watching to see if I'm truly your equal, or just a symbol you elevate when convenient. Let me do this. Trust me to handle it. The mate bond hummed between them, and she could feel his internal struggle, the instinct to protect warring with recognition that she was right. If you go, he said finally, each word carefully measured, you take Commander Thorn and a full security detail. You stay in constant communication, and at the first sign of genuine threat, you return immediately. No heroics. No taking unnecessary risks. Agreed, Elara said, relief flooding through her. And Elara? His hand came up to cup her face, the most intimate gesture he'd made since their bonding ceremony a week ago. If anything happens to you, there won't be a stone left standing in the southern territories. Do you understand? The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent warmth through her chest. I understand. Nothing will happen. See that it doesn't. He dropped his hand, stepping back to professional distance. You leave tomorrow at dawn. I'll brief Commander Thorn personally. After Elara left the war room, she returned to her study and retrieved the coded message. She needed to understand what she was walking into before heading south. A thought struck her. There was someone in the palace with both the skills and motivation to help her decipher the code. Someone whose loyalty to the kingdom might outweigh court politics. She found Magistrate Blackwood in the palace library, surrounded by legal texts. The older woman looked up as Elara approached, surprise flickering across her features when she saw they were alone. Luna, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I need help, Elara said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one could overhear. The Alpha King is planning military action against House Ravenna. I convinced him to let me go south first as a diplomatic mission. But I need to understand what I'm walking into. Elise's eyes widened. He's letting you go? That's unexpected. I can be persuasive when necessary. Elara pulled out the coded message. Can you help me decode this? I need to know exactly what conspiracy I'm facing. For a moment, Elise seemed torn. Then she nodded, taking the paper. Give me tonight. I'll have answers by morning. But Luna, be careful. If this conspiracy runs as deep as I suspect, you'll be walking into a den of vipers. Then I'll need to be more dangerous than they expect, Elara replied. The journey south took 2 days through territories Elara had never seen. Commander Thorn proved an excellent traveling companion, professional but warming to Elara after seeing her handle several diplomatic situations with grace and intelligence. You're better at this than I expected, the commander admitted on the second evening as they made camp. When His Majesty first announced you as Luna, I had doubts. But you've got instincts that can't be taught. High praise from someone who's served the kingdom for 20 years, Elara said. I call it as I see it. Thorn poked at their campfire. Though I'll admit, I'm concerned about where we're heading. House Ravenna isn't known for hospitality, especially toward those they see as threats. Then we'll have to change their perspective. Elara pulled out the decoded message Elise had provided that morning. The full conspiracy laid bare in shocking detail. House Ravenna wasn't planning rebellion alone. They had allies in 3 other houses, with a goal of either forcing the Alpha King to abdicate or triggering a war that would fracture the kingdom back into independent territories. And the catalyst for their plan? Eliminating the Luna. The coded message contained explicit discussion of ways to remove Elara, publicly humiliate her to force Kael to reject the mate bond, manufacture scandal to discredit her, or if necessary, arrange a tragic accident during travels. Elara's hands had shaken reading it that morning. Now, approaching House Ravenna's territory, she felt strange calm. Fear had transformed into determination. These conspirators saw her as a weakness to exploit. She would prove them catastrophically wrong. Commander, she said quietly, I need to tell you something about why we're really here. She explained everything. Elise's warning, the conspiracy, the threats against her life. Thorn's expression grew darker with each revelation. We should turn back, the commander said immediately. This is beyond a diplomatic mission. This is a trap. Probably, Elara agreed. But if we return without evidence, the Alpha King will march south with an army and burn everything. More death, more enemies, more instability. I'd rather spring their trap and turn it against them. That's insane. You're not a trained warrior. No, but I'm their Luna. I represent something they didn't anticipate. The possibility that strength and mercy can coexist. If I can expose their conspiracy without massive bloodshed, I prove that Luna Elara offers a different kind of power. She met Thorn's eyes. Will you help me? The commander was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled grimly. His Majesty is going to kill me for this. But yes, let's spring their trap. They arrived at House Ravenna's estate the next afternoon. A sprawling manor of white stone surrounded by manicured gardens and subtle fortifications. Lady Ravenna herself met them at the entrance, her expression a perfect mask of aristocratic courtesy. Luna Elara, what an unexpected honor. We weren't informed of your visit. A diplomatic tour of outlying territories, Elara replied smoothly. I'm still new to my role and wanted to meet directly with the kingdom's noble houses. I hope our arrival isn't too inconvenient. Not at all. Please come inside. Ravenna's smile didn't reach her eyes. I've prepared accommodations for you and your guards. The tour of the estate was a performance, both women playing their roles while sizing each other up. Ravenna showed off her family's wealth and influence, subtle reminders that House Ravenna commanded significant resources. Elara responded with genuine interest and diplomatic praise, never revealing she knew about the conspiracy. Dinner that evening proved more challenging. Ravenna had gathered her allied houses, Lord Ashford, Lady Meredith, and Duke Thornwell, creating a table full of conspirators surrounding Elara like predators. Such a brave Luna, Lady Meredith said sweetly over the second course, traveling without the Alpha King's protection. Aren't you concerned something might happen? Why would something happen? Elara replied with apparent innocence. I'm among loyal subjects of the kingdom, visiting fellow nobles. Unless you know of some threat I should be aware of? The implication hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in courtesy. Lord Ashford cleared his throat. Of course, we're all loyal to the crown, though some of us question whether certain recent decisions serve the kingdom's best interests. You mean my elevation to Luna? Elara said directly. You can speak plainly, Lord Ashford. I'm not offended by honest concern. Very well. He set down his fork. Many believe the Alpha King's decision to make you Luna based solely on the mate bond shows dangerous sentimentality, that putting personal feelings above political strategy demonstrates weakness. I'd argue the opposite, Elara replied calmly. Honoring sacred traditions like the mate bond demonstrates strength of character. It shows the Alpha King values our culture's deepest principles over political convenience. That's not weakness. That's integrity. Pretty words, Duke Thornwell interjected. But integrity doesn't hold kingdoms together. Power does. And a Luna from nowhere with no connections, no experience, no real authority dilutes that power. Does it? Elara leaned forward slightly. Or does it demonstrate that the throne values merit over lineage? That anyone with courage and capability can rise, rather than power being hoarded by the same families for generations? That seems like strength to me. Ravenna's mask slipped slightly, annoyance flashing across her face. You speak well, but words don't change reality. The kingdom faces challenges, border disputes, resource distribution, territories demanding greater autonomy. These require experienced leadership, not learning on the job. Then let's discuss those challenges specifically, Elara said. I'm here to learn, after all. What territorial autonomy do you seek, Lady Ravenna? The question caught the conspirators off guard. Too direct. Too knowledgeable. Standard local governance rights. Ravenna recovered quickly. The ability to manage our own territories without excessive oversight from the capital. Interesting, because current law already grants noble houses extensive local authority. Elara pulled out a document, one of the legal texts she'd studied. Unless there's some specific oversight you object to, perhaps military movement restrictions, the requirement to declare warrior training programs, the prohibition against forming unauthorized alliances? Silence fell over the table. Those were exactly the restrictions the conspiracy was violating. How did you... Lady Meredith started, then stopped. How did I know? Elara smiled, sharp and dangerous. Because I'm not the naive country wolf you assumed. I'm the Luna, and I take that responsibility seriously, which means when I heard rumors of unusual activity in the Southern Territories, I studied the relevant laws, talked to the right people, and discovered some very interesting patterns. She stood, and Commander Thorne immediately moved to flank her, hand on sword hilt. Here's what I know, Elara continued, her voice carrying quiet authority. 4 noble houses have been secretly meeting, gathering warriors, discussing ways to undermine the throne. You've been sharing coded messages about removing me to destabilize the Alpha King's rule. You've built this conspiracy thinking you're protecting autonomy, but what you're actually doing is preparing for war. Lord Ashford shot to his feet. You have no proof. I have intercepted messages, witness testimony, and surveillance reports. Elara wasn't bluffing. Magistrate Blackwood had provided everything. I have enough evidence to justify immediate military response. The Alpha King wanted to march south with an army. Do you know why he didn't? No one answered. Because I asked him not to. Because I believed, perhaps foolishly, that you might be willing to talk instead of fight. That we could find a solution that didn't end in blood and destruction. She let her gaze sweep the table. Was I wrong? The conspirators exchanged glances, calculating odds, weighing options. What do you want? Ravenna asked finally, her aristocratic mask completely gone. I want peace. I want this kingdom to be strong without requiring fear. I want nobles who feel heard without needing to plot rebellion. Elara placed both hands on the table, leaning in. Here's my offer. You disband your conspiracy immediately. No more secret meetings, no more warrior gatherings, no more coded messages. In exchange, I'll arrange a formal council where you can present your concerns about territorial autonomy directly to the Alpha King. Real dialogue, real negotiation. And if we refuse? Duke Thornwell asked. Then Commander Thorne sends a signal to the troops waiting 2 hours north, and by this time tomorrow, The Alpha King himself will be here with an army. You'll get the war you were planning for. Except you're not ready for it, and you'll lose. Elara straightened. Your choice. Peace and dialogue or war and destruction? The silence stretched. Then Lady Meredith spoke quietly. How do we know the Alpha King will actually negotiate? That this isn't just a trap to identify all the conspirators? You don't, Elara admitted. You have to trust me. Just like I'm trusting that you actually care about your territories and people, that this conspiracy came from genuine concern rather than simple power hunger. Lord Ashford laughed bitterly. Trust. From a Luna who just threatened us with military annihilation, I presented you with choices and consequences. Elara corrected. That's leadership, not threat. Now choose. More silence. Then Ravenna stood slowly, her expression unreadable. I need to consult with my advisors privately. You have 1 hour, Elara said. After that, I assume the answer is war. 50 minutes later, Lady Ravenna returned with the other conspirators. All looked defeated but resigned. We accept your terms, Ravenna said stiffly. The conspiracy ends tonight. We'll await the formal council you promised. Relief flooded through Elara, though she kept her expression calm. A wise decision. Commander Thorn will coordinate the logistics of dismantling your warrior gatherings. And Lady Ravenna? She paused at the door. You were right that I'm inexperienced and learning as I go, but that doesn't make me weak. Remember that. The journey back north was quiet. Elara processing everything that had happened. She'd walked into enemy territory, faced down a conspiracy, and negotiated peace when war seemed inevitable. She'd proven something to the conspirators, to Commander Thorn, and most importantly, to herself. When they reached the palace 3 days later, Kael was waiting in the courtyard. His expression was a storm of relief, anger, and something deeper as he strode toward her. You resolved it, he said, not a question. The conspiracy is disbanded. I've arranged a formal council to address their concerns properly. Elara met his eyes. No blood was shed, no territory burned, just dialogue and consequences. Commander Thorn briefed me via message. You took insane risks. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, and we avoided a war. She stepped closer. I did what a Luna should do, found a different path than immediate violence. Isn't that what you needed? Someone to balance your strength with. Different strength? Kael stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he pulled her into an embrace, brief but fierce, his face buried in her hair. Don't ever frighten me like that again, he murmured. The mate bond sang between them, stronger than ever. Elara felt something shift, not just in their connection, but in how he saw her. She wasn't just his chosen Luna anymore. She'd earned the title through her own actions. When he released her, his expression had softened. Come, we need to discuss the council arrangements, and... He hesitated. There are things about my past, about why I rule the way I do, that you should understand. If we're truly going to rule together, you need to know the full truth. As they walked into the palace together, Elara realized they'd crossed a threshold. The secrets of the kingdom were being revealed, layer by layer, and with each revelation, she was becoming not just the Luna by bond, but the Luna by right, a queen who could stand beside her king and forge a different future for them all. But watching from a tower window, an unseen figure observed their entrance with calculation. The conspiracy Elara had dismantled was only one thread in a much larger web, and while she'd proven herself more formidable than expected, that just meant she'd become a target worth more careful planning. The real trial was only beginning. The council chamber buzzed with tension as nobles from across the kingdom gathered for what many believed would be a reckoning. Elara stood beside Kael at the head of the grand table, no longer the uncertain girl who had knelt before his throne 2 months ago. This council convenes to address concerns about territorial governance, Kael announced, his voice carrying absolute authority. Luna Elara has guaranteed all present safe passage to speak freely. Lord Ashford rose first, presenting grievances about resource distribution and local autonomy. Elara listened carefully, then responded with solutions she'd spent weeks developing with Magistrate Blackwood's guidance. Compromises that granted more local control while maintaining kingdom unity. One by one, Nobles who had been conspirators became collaborators. Lady Ravenna herself grudgingly acknowledged that Elara's proposed reforms addressed many concerns. But as the session progressed, a commotion erupted outside. Commander Thorn burst through the doors, blood on her armor. "Your Majesty, attack on the eastern border, not from the south. Duke Thornwell's forces, despite his presence here." Betrayal flashed across faces as everyone realized the conspiracy had run deeper than revealed. Thornwell himself paled, standing abruptly. "I knew nothing of this. My son, he must have acted without authorization." "Commander, mobilize our forces," Kael ordered, fury cold in his eyes. "I'll lead them personally." "No," Elara said firmly, surprising everyone including Kael. "You stay here, finish this council, show strength through stability. I'll go with Commander Thorn." "Absolutely not. I resolved the Southern conspiracy without bloodshed. Let me try to do the same in the East." She met his gaze steadily, the mate bond thrumming between them. "Trust me. Trust your Luna." The chamber held its breath. Then Kael nodded slowly, a gesture that acknowledged her not just as mate but as true partner in rule. "Commander Thorn, take our best warriors. Bring my Luna home safely, or don't come back at all." The eastern border revealed chaos. Duke Thornwell's son Marcus had indeed launched an unauthorized attack, hoping to use the council as distraction. But he'd underestimated both the border defenses and how quickly word would reach the capital. Elara rode at the front of their forces, no longer hiding behind guards. When they reached Marcus's position, she called for parley before weapons clashed. "Marcus Thornwell!" Her voice carried across the field. "Your father sits in council even now, working toward peace. Don't destroy his efforts with pointless violence." Marcus, younger than Elara and clearly in over his head, hesitated. His warriors looked uncertain, momentum broken. "The Luna offers you choice," Commander Thorn added, her sword still sheathed but ready. "Stand down now, face justice fairly, and your warriors go home to their families. Fight, and we end you here." The standoff stretched taut as wire. Then Marcus dropped his sword. "I yield to the Luna's judgment." 2 weeks later, Elara stood in the throne room once more, but everything had changed. The reforms she'd proposed were being implemented. The conspiracy had been dismantled through justice rather than massacre. Marcus Thornwell served community service rather than facing execution, his redemption path earning respect from previously skeptical nobles. "You've changed this kingdom in ways I couldn't," Kael said quietly that evening, as they stood together on the palace balcony, watching sunset paint the mountains gold. "Made it stronger through mercy rather than fear." "We changed it together," Elara corrected, her hand finding his. "Your strength gave me the foundation to show compassion. We balance each other. That's what makes us powerful." He turned to face her fully, gray eyes warm with something deeper than respect. "I chose you as Luna because of the mate bond. But you've become Luna through your own actions, your own strength. I don't just need you anymore, Elara. I love you." The words hung between them, vulnerable and profound. The mate bond blazed bright, no longer just instinct but conscious choice. "I love you too," Elara whispered. "My king, my mate, my equal partner." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, sealing their bond not just as duty but as devotion. When they pulled apart, Elara looked out over the kingdom they would rule together, no longer a tyrant and his unexpected queen, but two wolves who had found strength in partnership, power in balance, and love in the most unexpected of circumstances. She had bowed before the Alpha King to spare her pack. He had ordered her to rise as his true Luna, and together they had risen to become something greater than either could have been alone. A partnership that would reshape the kingdom and prove that true power came not from fear or force, but from courage, wisdom, and the willingness to trust in fate's most unexpected gifts. The court still watched. Challenges still waited. But standing beside Kael with the mate bond singing between them and a kingdom transformed by their combined strength, Elara finally understood what it meant to be Luna. Not just a title, not just a crown, but a calling to lead with both strength and heart, to balance justice with mercy, to show that wolves could rule through honor rather than terror. She was Luna Elara, and her story was only beginning.